They believe that this is what we have to suffer through as a society because of equity, because of social justice. This is their demand. Effectively, it's better for people to be unsafe on the streets than for the prison population to be too large in this city or that city, right? Then people who are incarcerated, ending mass incarceration was the rallying cry, a big part of it for the progressive prosecutors, even before the George Floyd incident, right? So there's a part of and the way you know this, Clay, is that in a lot of places, it's been clear, the numbers have been clear for going on 3 years now, and they haven't done anything to change it. If there is one issue that you could put up alongside the economy in terms of how much it really affects people in their everyday lives, and you could certainly argue, depending where we're talking about, it affects them even more than the economy, it would be public safety, crime, law and order, right? That is absolutely essential to a well-functioning, to a happy and, yes, safe society. You have to have intelligent policies in place. You have to have the rule of law. You have to have police that are supported in what they do. We have seen the opposite for years now. This past weekend, 34 people shot in Chicago. 34 in one weekend, everybody. And that's not even a record for Chicago. That's just horrifically another weekend in Chicago. Right now, the murder rate in Philadelphia, is over 400. Philadelphia is on track for its worst year of murders ever after last year having its all-time worst year of murders. So it had the worst ever last year, and it can't bring it down. In fact, it's looking to be ahead of last year this year. Atlanta is on track for the most murders it has ever had as a city. And it is up 3 years in a row starting in 2019. You'll notice something. All of these places that have seen dramatic increases in crime, it not only starts in 2019, it starts right around June of 2019. All of a sudden, there is this shift. You can see on charts that show you the rate of murders. You can see that shows you violent, serious felonies. It all starts getting worse. And now, the Democrats, you will recall, and many of you remember this, I know Clay does, we talked about it on the show, for the first year of this, you remember what they were saying? It's COVID. COVID.
Exactly right.
They were lying to you. Go back, you can find this all over the place. Oh, well, COVID's caused an increase in murder because people are upset. Meanwhile, other countries all over the world actually had a decrease in murders because nobody was going outside. This was crazy. This made no sense. You're locked at home.
We argued it. One of the first things I remember having a conversation with you on this show, Buck, was last June we were coming on and we're saying, hey, crime is skyrocketing everywhere. And they're saying, Democrats were at that time, oh, it's the disruptions caused by COVID. And you and I were on the air saying, wait a minute. But people didn't go out for much of 2020, right? The numbers should have all gone down. It's not even logically, analytically arguable.
In fact, if you were to really look at it as we did, you would see that there was, during the major shutdown, right? Yep. There was a period in March, April, where you basically had 2 months of dramatically dropped crime. So for 2019 to be a year of incredibly increased crime, you have to take into account that during the lockdowns, crime went very, very low.
Beginning of 2020, it was actually down substantially. It only started to skyrocket as soon as the George Floyd protest began.
It was the George Floyd incident, the BLM movement, the Democrats mobilizing in an election year, and the narrative, not just the act of defunding, but the narrative of defunding the police. Just to remind everybody, and you'll recognize a lot of these voices, because now they're all saying, "Oh, we didn't want to defund police." You know, Biden's all, "Oh, not a joke. I don't want to defund." Sure, these are Democrats, including the vice president, I believe, is on this montage saying just that.
So we've been talking about defunding the police.
There's some issues that we ask police to do, like mental health issues or policing in schools and all the rest, that perhaps we can shuffle some of that money around.
Suck it up. Defunding the police has to happen. We need to defund the police.
Mayor Eric Garcetti saying, take some of the money from policing, about $150 million.
I applaud Eric Garcetti for doing what he's done.
Funding isn't
necessarily as aggressive as a lot of folks paint it. You know, school budgets get cut almost every year.
Not only do we need to disinvest in police, but we need to completely dismantle the Minneapolis Police Department.
So yes to some defunding.
We have to reallocate resources, so yes.
Would you echo calls from some Black Lives Matter activists to defund the police?
Well, I think now is the time that we need to actually do that work.
It is outdated, it is wrong-headed thinking to think that the only way you're going to get communities to be safe is to put more police officers on the street.
So yes, defund your butts, defund you.
We do need to reimagine how we are dispatched to these scenes in terms of what's the best tool to bring.
Again, what I mean by defund the police is not take all funds from the police. It is a reduction of the funding going into the police department.
They are talking about reducing the allocation of resources to that department. And I think every single city in this country ought to be thinking about the same thing.
The minute you talk about reducing a police department's budget, then it's like all hell breaks loose, and everybody acts like you're signaling Armageddon. But that's not the case.
Yes, I support the reallocation of resources from NYPD.
We will be moving funding from the NYPD to youth initiatives and social services.
Yes, I support the defund movement. I'm for responsible reallocation of resources.
And defund the police.
I think you do all those other things, you don't need all the money that's going in the police department. So yeah, I mean, the spirit of it, I do support that.
We need to invest more in neighborhood services and programming for our residents, for our communities on the front end. Where will that money come from? Well, it can come from overbloated budgets in police departments.
So no, we should not continue to fund more and more our law enforcement, putting the pressure on them to be the whole arbiter of a safe community.
Yeah, and a lot of us were asked if we could imagine a future without police back in 2017 when we were running for office. And I answered yes to that question.
We are going to reduce funding in the police department and redirect that money.
That's what you call the receipts, Buck. That's what you call direct receipts. Democrats have, who supported defund the police, blood on their hands in cities and states all across America.
So I get to see headlines like this from the Daily News, which is a left-wing paper. Violent, unprovoked attacks have New Yorkers on edge. And then in quotes, there is something profoundly wrong. Yes, there is something profoundly wrong. And let me explain why the violent, unprovoked or violent random attacks. This is what we're seeing videos of. And I think the video, because of the proliferation of video all across social media, when people see what's going on, they see that we're not talking about, there are some cities where there are pockets of the city where there's a lot of gang activity, where the drug trade results in violence. Now that's criminal and that needs to be stopped too. But what you're seeing all over the country now, because there are fewer cops on the streets, because the cops don't feel backed up, because progressive, Democrat, Biden-supporting prosecutors won't do their jobs and actually do public safety. Instead, they're doing social justice. What you see is people walking down the street with a bag of groceries and some lunatic who's been arrested 100 times hits them in the face with a brick. And then you see they're out in a couple of hours. Then you see that somehow they're out on bail and a few weeks will pass and they're going to go before some lib judge who was appointed by some Democrat who's going to say, well, we want to make sure that we don't have too many people in the prison population. So we'll give you a suspended sentence or whatever. This is what is happening everywhere. And Democrats are running for cover on it, including Fetterman. Philly, as I said, worst murder rate ever this year. Fetterman, when he was in elected office, was going around saying, yeah, we should let 40% of people out of prison in this state. Or 30%, that's what he said. They let 40% out, and now Philadelphia is a war zone. And does anyone believe in cause and effect, Clay? That's what we're being asked.
Not only that, Fetterman has pulled all, I'm told, Black Lives Matter support off of his campaign website. So you'll remember in 2020, when if you had ever bought like a gift basket, you were getting emailed by companies saying like, we stand in solidarity, BLM, like, remember when everybody was
we know you bought soap from us 5 years ago, but we just want to tell you where we stand on police and defunding.
Hey, I just want shampoo, Head and Shoulders. I don't really care about any of your efforts or right guard. Hey, just give me some deodorant. I don't really care about anything that your company stands for other than does your shampoo work? Does your deodorant work? Whatever you've got out there, so give me the product, okay? Fetterman now Oz is going to win. We are 36 days out. I believe voting in Pennsylvania has officially started. Some would say it never ended. And I believe that Dr. Oz is going to win. And sometimes you can tell the momentum. You know, it's a lot like a game. Somebody's up, somebody's down. Where's the ball in the field? Democrats are in the scrub campaign materials off anything related to crime. And when you see, remember we talked, I think it was last week, Buck, that in the Washington Post ABC poll, Republicans have not had this big of a lead in who will solve crime since 1991. 1991. We have to go back over 30 years to a time, and a lot of you out there old enough to remember, 1991, crime was surging everywhere. Buck, you were a young whippersnapper, but you wasn't safe to walk through Central Park. Like that was the pre-Giuliani before they came in and took over New York City. And to your point, we were up for your engagement party. I was in New York. I like to occasionally just flip on local news, you know, as I'm killing time to see what they are going to be focusing on. Crime. It was like just local news in New York City, right? You referenced the Daily News, which is a left-wing newspaper. But in every city in America, they usually, if it bleeds, it leads, has long been the case. But there is a sense that things are broken and people are throwing up their arms saying no one's safe right now.
Here's what everyone needs to understand about the Democrat left mentality about all of this. At some level, they believe that this is what we have to suffer through as a society because of equity, because of social justice. This is their demand. Effectively, it's better for people to be unsafe on the streets than for the prison population to be too large in this city or that city, right? Than people who are incarcerated. Ending mass incarceration was the rallying cry, a big part of it for the progressive prosecutors, even before the George Floyd incident, right? So there's a part of and the way you know this, Clay, is that in a lot of places, it's been clear, the numbers have been clear for going on 3 years now, and they haven't done anything to change it. They're not actually, I mean, I mentioned before, how are things going in Seattle? Seattle is still hemorrhaging police officers. They're going to be down from, let's call it, 1,000 to, I think it's going to be something like, 750, something like that. That's a huge difference on a police force of that size in a short period of time. It means fewer presence patrols. It means fewer people on the streets, giving people the sense that, one, the bad guys aren't going to do stuff, and two, that they should feel a bit safe. This was all not only predictable, we predicted it. We said when we started the show together, this is going to continue on. They blamed COVID, everybody. Yeah. I mean, anyone who blamed COVID for the rise in crime is either dishonest or a moron. And people did this all across the Democrat Party. And now they're running from it because they don't want to be held accountable, because they have no argument otherwise.
And this is the way that I would crystallize it for so many people out there, because I know this is happening in my own life. Have you changed the way that you instruct your kids or your wife in choices that they're making when they're out on their own in the city or state where you live since 2019? I have. I mean, I think you'd be crazy to be a dad, granddad out there and not be talking to women and kids in your lives and saying, hey, murder is up 40%, a lot higher than that in some communities, but an average of 40% since 2019 in this country. It's real. That threat that many of us feel is omnipresent because we have taken police's ability to do their jobs. And I talk differently to my wife and kids now than I did in 2019 as it pertains to choices they're making in neighborhoods and in cities and states.
And you're not living in the middle of New York City right now, right?
That's right. So, I'm in a very safe
neighborhood.
Place.
I have to tell Carrie, that I don't want her taking the subway at night. I want her. I'll pay for a cab. I'll pay for a car service. Whatever we have to do. I don't want her on the subway as a single 33-year-old.
I told
woman.
My wife, we used to ride the subway, Buck, when she came up this summer and we went out to dinner. I said, when I'm doing the show, you want to run around, go shop somewhere, just take a car. do not get on the subway. And I think there are dads, husbands, granddads out there that are having conversations with their kids and grandkids they haven't had in years.
And here's the other part of this. And everyone who lives in New York, in the city, or comes into the city for work, which is a lot of our people who are listening on WOR, it's not just the violent assaults that you hear about. It's the constant menacing of clearly deranged lunatics on the streets who come up and demand money, and you don't give it to them, and they say, bleep you, and they scream at you, and they threaten you. I mean, I have had numerous times on the streets within blocks of where I live in the last 18 months, last 2 years. I was thinking of 18 months because while we've been doing the show, I've had people basically threaten me on the streets of New York City, random strangers, lunatics, usually shirtless. I can usually, tell they're walking over. They're sometimes, basically barefoot. I mean, they look like they've just run out of the insane asylum. And they'll say something horrific and violent. I mean, they've said, when you do that, when you have that enough times, when that becomes normalized in a city, people don't want to deal with it anymore. And that's where they are. And Democrats need to face up to their creation here, to the reality of what they're doing, and people need to vote against them. I don't know what else to say. It absolutely must happen, or else this continues, or else it keeps getting worse.